Hi everyone, morning and welcome to today's demo. Just to provide a bit of context for why we're doing this first before I hand over to my colleagues. So as part of Digital Inclusion Innovation Programme, we've been looking at kind of potential platforms that can help borrowers direct the social value propositions of contracts to kind of supporting and kind of directly funding digital inclusion related initiatives. We've held a series of demos and today we have colleagues from Havering and Impact Tool just telling us about how they're thinking about measuring the impact from social value contributions, and then the second part of the session will be led by Bethan, who'll be kind of demoing their system and how you can use it for that purpose. What I would say is that you can ask questions in the chat throughout the session, and then we'll have a Q&A at the very end. But for now, please can I hand over to Jackie from Havering.
Thank you so much, Janta. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see it?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I can't see anybody, so let me just. Okay, yeah, thank you so much. So, in terms of measuring social impact, my name's Jackie Khan. I'm the Transformation Programme Manager. So how we've come to this position is that I lead on the programmes to look at how we work with our communities better. So I lead on the development of the Community Hubs programme. And one of the things that kept on coming up was about, so what difference are you actually making and how are you measuring that? And one of the biggest things is that, with community projects, it's very much kind of evaluations and, different ways of how you kind of monitor your programs. But in terms of really demonstrating the real impact, there was very much not a common approach to it. And particularly because the Community Hub project itself was working with the voluntary community sector and other partners, it was really important for us to share and demonstrate the impact we were making for our residents. So as we were looking and researching into different tools, we also, were taken down the route of, procurement as well, and looking at the social value that's derived from procurement. But we really wanted to look at, what the difference and the impacts that we were making, but also, look at the measurement as a whole. So look at the whole borough and look at what the contributions our partners were making as well. So when we look at impact, we look at the effect that the action is having on people as a result. But, and we look at everything around like the social, economic, environmental outcomes, community cohesion, health and well-being, and we put it all, look at it all in one, and equalities and diversity as well. But, the social value which drives it, which is often a social, it's a proxy, financial proxy, is really, from the user's perspective, what the changes that the residents really feel. So sometimes social impact and social value is actually, spoken at the same time. But for me, it's good to clarify what those the things are as well. So in terms of looking at the tool itself, we felt that it had a real kind of corporate benefit to Havering as well. It could really help us drive through some of the strategic priorities that we're measuring as a council, but also look at how we're able to turn strategies on its head and deliver some more outcome-based monitoring, so it's more meaningful to residents and also like key stakeholders as well, about the real changes that we've been able to make as a result. And as part of that, that ongoing analysis and reporting would also help us understand what works and what doesn't work as well. as well as what I've mentioned before about, looking at, how community wellbeing is in the borough, and really give us a map and help us join up, all of our, initiatives as well, to help us really look at, what areas need work, what's not working, what is working, which partners are really instrumental, what is the, the role that the council is playing as well. So it will not only help us, look at how social value is delivered through our procurement partners, but also look at, what is the real, cost efficiencies that we can do as a, partnership across the borough, across the system, but also look at, how we generate some more cost savings, and, and look at how we validate our cost avoidance as well. And as well as, more than anything, it's about really maximising our, our social impact that's delivered, and making sure that we pick up all of the social value that's delivered across the borough through our partners, as well as our procurement, but make sure that it's focused in the right area as well, to give us a real strategy and a real plan of how we're delivering real change, for Havering. So at the moment, we're looking at piloting the tool on specific programs, looking at, our social value strategy, particularly with our contributions for our through our joint venture partner, but also our community hubs program, which works with primarily with the voluntary community sector, and also looking at how we are, delivering specific programs such as local area coordination, which is tailored support for residents, looking at and increasing the capacity of the community assets within their area, and how they're able to work with community partners and within their own community to live a better life. And also, we wanted to put a spin on it and looked at, really, there's a changing and impending thing about libraries, the future of libraries as well, and we really wanted to look at the value of libraries within our borough as well as part of it, and we might actually throw in leisure centres as well, but at the moment we've got libraries. So we actually researched through a lot of platforms, and we found that, some of them were really very prescriptive in terms of using a particular framework. Some of them really needed a lot of work in terms of what we wanted to do. And we, understood that, what we wanted to do was a whole raft of different things. But, we really wanted to make sure that we were using a platform or utilising the platform that was right for us. So we chose Impact because they were framework agnostic, so they didn't use like the TOMS framework or any specific framework that was tied to measuring their any delivery. So you could measure strategies as well as look at specific frameworks and look at cost avoidance and cost savings as part of it. So it was very simple and user friendly. And it will really help us with that social value engagement in terms of getting partners on board to look at how we're delivering social value across the borough as well. And one of the big massive things as well is about the qualitative and the quantitative data as well, and it's about how we put that both together, just in terms of not just delivering like words and numbers. So it's a cloud-based platform. It allows not only the council but also partners to input into the tool as well. And as a result, partners are also able to generate some reports. There is some administrative restrictions, but they are able to also, at a click of a button, be able to generate reports as well, which will help, particularly organisations and VCS to demonstrate their effectiveness, and helps them with funding bids, and helps us as well. I did a lot of research into Impact itself, and it is, very active. And I've had an interview with Flintshire as well to ask about, their experience of using them as well. And as part of, as all councils, as we all know, it is cyber essential plus certified, and the data security integrity is foremost at the front of their framework. So what can it do? And Bethany's going to go through this in more detail, but it allows us to be able to upload data in real time, from spreadsheets, from some of the user forms, and we're able to do this in, using API integration and automated where possible. And this will help us, reduce the time in our data collection and some of our reporting. It captures the evidence as well as the stories, will help us really analyse and report on some of our programmes and projects. And as I said before, one of the big things was about identifying some of the cost savings as well as making sure that we're able to validate some of our cost avoidance savings as well, so that it's auditable with data validation mechanisms that is built within it. So as I said, the impact tool is in real time, and it can be shared, in terms of with external stakeholders and via social media. So will allow us to do that outcome-based monitoring reporting, which I was suggesting in terms of the opportunities for Havering as well. And as I said, in terms of the strategies as well, you can look at KPIs. Or look at the milestones as well as some of the social value that's been created as part of it. And as I said, one of the big draws was about the framework, so that you can measure all of these different things. So if you're measuring particular milestones with your strategies, and also looking at the impact as well, it's a way of bringing it all together. So, Tom's framework is one that's used a lot by the councils, but alongside that, the HACT social value calculator is one of the frameworks that I would use, particularly for my local area coordination and some of the community hubs program as well, which will look at the the real value that the program is making. So that was really a whistle-stop tour. I'm going to hand over to Bethan, who's going to take you in a little bit more detail about what the tool can actually do.
Thank you, Jackie. So hi everyone, I'm Bethan Williams. I'm from Impact Reporting. So Jackie's already explained kindly a bit about what we do and as an organisation. Really pleased to be working with Jackie and the team at Havering. So they're a new client for us, so we're in the process of onboarding. So I can't show you anything specific to Havering, but I can show you a demo which will enable you to see what's possible with Impact. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah,
Great, okay. So what I'm going to do, as Jackie's explained, is I'm going to run through a demo for you. First of all, I'll just provide a little bit of context from our perspective. So we were born out of a social enterprise. We have a very strong social ethos as a business, and obviously we work with organisations to help them better capture, measure and report on social value data and environmental data as well. So we work with organisations cross-sector, so local authorities, as Jackie mentioned, such as Essex, Denbighshire, Flintshire, Havering. And we also work with organisations that are linked to local authorities in many ways, like housing associations. So we work with JJ Housing, Keepmoat, PF Places for People, One Manchester. We also work with a number of different contractors in terms of in the infrastructure space. So Be First, we work with Graham Construction. We work with Continental Landscape, so it's quite vast in terms of our remit. But what we found is, and what I'm going to show you today, has been partly developed, the most recent parts of this have been partly developed alongside our clients, because our clients help to feed into that process to help to form the tool. You're the best advocates, you're the people who are using this, so we take and build our product roadmap from client interactions. So I'm going to share my screen with you. and then I'm going to take you through a demo. So. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to start from the top. Jackie's already mentioned a few things about sort of the way that Impact's set up in terms of security. It's a cloud-based solution. You can access it from anywhere on any device using a unique URL, which is shown at the top here. You can have multiple different user types, so you can give people different access points. Now, Jackie mentioned about suppliers, and suppliers can interact directly with Impact, so there are different user types to reflect that, so that they'll only be able to see certain parts of the system, depending on what you want them to see. So I'm going to start with showing you activity data. Now, if you think of activities as being your sort of your data input points, and this is across the whole organization, across your projects, across your internal organization, because as you know, social value can be created in a number of different ways. So it can be created through your partnerships with supply chain. It can be created as part of the tender process which precedes that. It can be created in your business with business as usual, and also social value initiatives that you're running specifically. So all of that is encompassed into the activities part of Impact, which I'm showing here. So the activities are driven by you as an organisation. So as part of the onboarding, we go through the process of identifying what these activities will be. So we'll go through that process with Havering and other clients. These are some examples. So you'll see here we've got business mentoring, donations, volunteering, work experience, and so on. And as you scroll down, you can have as many of these as you want that are applicable. And there are also environmental initiatives in here as well. So we can capture both within Impact. Most of our organisations have an emphasis on social, but it's good to know that you can capture recycling figures, greening our vehicle fleet, whatever is relevant to you. An example of that would be we work with Places for People who do repairs and maintenance, obviously on their housing stock. And within that, you can not only capture the sort of social value benefits in terms of the well-being of organisations, of clients being able to have warmer houses, but you're also able to look at the efficiency and CO2 savings of replacing boilers. So there's lots of different ways that you can set up activities. So I'll show you how activities work. So if you imagine I am a employee of a local authority and I want to log something to Impact, we encourage as many people to engage with Impact in your organisation as possible. It gives you better data, more accurate data, and more engagement with social value and what you're trying to achieve. So I'm going to go into one of these. I'm going to go into apprentices and show you how this works. So for each of these activities, you'll see that there is a date range which you can set. Here we're looking at number of weeks of apprenticeships, and below that is a feed of everything that's been inputted across the organisation. You can also have multiple different data points across one activity. So here we've got weeks, but we've also got a number of apprentices trained and apprentices completed as well. So to be able to log activity, it's really easy. These are configurable forms which you can collect whatever data is important to that activity. So these can be as detailed or as straightforward as you need them to be. So let me just put in some dates. You can put in end date as well. Here you can assign it to a project. I'll come on to projects later. I'm an admin, so I can actually log for other people as well. But if you're just a standard user, you would just log for yourself. You can do things like collect geographical region if that was important. And then you can attach a description and files and images. Now, those files and images can be photos. So if you're doing a community initiative and you want to capture some of that, then you can upload photos here and it provides you with a library of those. Or it can be evidence against that activity log. So if you want all of your activity logs to be evidence, then this is where you would attach the evidence. When I submit, actually put it there. It allows me to share on social media if I want to. Now, this is something which can be turned on or off, and it's available to organisations who are looking to perhaps raise their profile a little bit about what they're doing from a social and environmental standpoint. So you can give access to your marketing comms team, for example, and they can access that. So, sorry, give me 1 second. Don't know why it didn't log then. Okay. When we go back to apprenticeships, what you see is, you should see that it's logged. There we go. So what I added has been logged 15 seconds ago. So it shows the real-time element, which Jackie mentioned as well. It's really important to be able to look at these figures in real time to make real-time decisions on what's happening. You don't want to spend weeks and weeks or months and months doing an initiative that isn't giving you the social value that you want. So this allows you to be able to look at all data in real time. So this particular activity feeds through to a goal, which is called social value generated. Activities can feed through to one or multiple goals. If I go onto the goals page, this is where you set your KPIs as an organisation, and it allows you, like I say, to do a combination of social and environmental. So we've got a CO2 saving, we've got a social value generated, volunteering, and so on. You'll notice that some of these are simple aggregates of the logs. So if you're looking at volunteering, if we click into that one, you can see that this is number of hours. So every log that contributes to this will be aggregated into this total. And you set yourself a target, and then you can see how you're contributing to that target. This one, which is social value generated, actually has a conversion attached to it to convert these particular activities here into a financial proxy. So it uses, as Jackie mentioned, we're framework agnostic or conversion agnostic. So you are able to use whatever is most applicable to your organisation. There are a myriad of different ways of calculating social value, and TOMS is one of them, and you probably have heard of that. There are lots of others as well. So TOMS is based on the unit cost database. There's the Green Book Treasury figures, there's DEFRA for environmental. There's a lot of different sources to be able to calculate what you need. Now, the reason for that, and the reason we're agnostic, is because it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. You might not be interested in actually monetizing your social value. You might be more interested in representing that in a different way. And so by being framework agnostic, we allow you to do that. So I'll just quickly show you where these conversions sit. This is an admin panel, and it just allows you to, for instance, we were looking at, let's look at apprentices into pounds. So this is where you would attach the evidence. So when you come to audit your figures, this is where they can be audited in terms of the evidence of where you get your converter, and then the conversion factors, which have a multiplier attached to it, depending on what framework you're using. So that's how the conversions work. And once they're set up, they automatically convert whatever activities are relevant into the goals. So there's also projects. So what we were just looking at was aggregated across projects and your organisation as a whole. When we move on to projects, this allows you to set up individual projects with individual activities and goals. So if I click into one of these here, so this is basically a hierarchy of what's happening. So we've got these different headings here for the different project types, and then underneath that are all the different projects. So you can collect different information around start date, end date, and so on. And when you click into one of these, you can see a number. This is the dashboard, which I'll come back to, but you can see you draw in whichever activities are relevant to that project. And this is where you allow your supply chain partners to interact with Impact. You would give them access to just their project, and they can come in here, and much the same as I showed you in terms of logging activity, they fill in forms to say what they've done. So this is where you would be able to set them their target. So here we've got 10 people that they need to do digital outreach to, and so far 7 have been captured into Impact. If you see below that, you can see that they've exceeded their total there. So So on the dashboard side of this, it allows you to be able to see at a glance how things are performing. It's ragged in terms of the colours, so you can just see how the performance is going, and chase up, and also set up automated chasers as well for maybe partners who are not inputting data. So if they haven't logged into Impact for a period of time, then they can receive an automated email that'll say, please, could you log your data? So let me just show you one more of the. So if you wanted to look at the project at a higher level, so this is for all projects under infrastructure, you can do that and it aggregates the data there. And then these are all the sub-projects. So if I click into another one, you can see how they look. So very visual. You're able to look at a glance and see how you're performing, or your contractors are performing, or your partners. So from the tenders perspective, so this allows you to feed into projects. So projects can be set up independently of tenders, or they can be driven by tenders. So the way that tenders work is if you're running a procurement exercise and you want to include social value in that tender, then that can be handled through Impact. So if I click on one of these, what happens is when you create a tender, you get a link that you can share publicly. So that can go into your e-procurement platform against the social value question with an explanation of why you're taking this approach in terms of linking out to Impact to capture that data. What we found from clients and why we created this was that Flintshire Council, when we were initially communicating with them about Impact, we're talking about the fact that social value is a very open-ended question at the moment in procurement, and it's hard to compare different bids, and it's hard for organisations who perhaps don't have a social value department to be able to contribute to a tender because they don't understand what is required of them from a social value perspective. So this sort of levels the playing field a little bit to enable you to work with more of the smaller organisations who are perhaps not able to compete ordinarily. So if I show you how this works by setting up a new tender, so if you add a new tender here, you can put in details of introduction text, which provides the context. So it's useful for organisations to know why you're asking for social value, and if they understand that, then it helps them to be able to formulate their answers. And then what you do is you select the activities that are relevant to that tender from here. So this is all of the ones that I showed you earlier in the activities section. But what you do is you look through here and you select the ones which are relevant. You move through each of these, whichever ones you want to include, and set it up that way. Once it's been set up, as I say, it delivers a unique URL. Now, if I click on this, I can show you what the actual tenderer would see. So the bidding organisation. So if I click on this, so that I'm now a bidder, I come in here and I enter my organisation name and email address. This is the context that I talked about earlier that's been set up to provide the bidder with some idea of why you're asking for this. And then they would move through each of these sections and make offers against them. Now you can make these mandatory if you want, or you can allow them to select which they're stronger at and therefore make offers against those. So when I make an offer, what it does, it pulls through the conversion factor if you have applied one where I showed you earlier. So this allows you to monetize what they're offering. If you want to turn that off, you can, and you could just have the figures. It depends on the sort of, I suppose it depends on their understanding of social value and how you're going to actually evaluate those bids. You also need to enter a method statement. So it's not just about how you're going to deliver and what you're going to deliver, but how you're going to deliver that as well. And then you can move through this and enter the data accordingly. So let's just put in a couple of these as well. So this is a recycling one. I'm just going to put in some kilograms there. When the bidder is happy with what they've selected here, they can see they can actually save their progress or save and review. So if I just click on save and review, It gives me a summary of what I am going to put forward as my bid. And if they're monetary total, it will add those up. If they're separate, so recycling, for instance, is kilograms, so it's a different unit, it will show that separately. And then it also flags up where information is missing, such as method statements. The next process is to download that. So you would download that and that would be available then to upload to your e-procurement platform as required by the bidder for that particular question. When the bidders submit their bids, all of the bids are here, and you can see the sum of the targets and the number of activities that they've contributed to. You can look at those in detail if you want to. When you come to award, you would award the bid by clicking on this, and it takes you through a wizard that will transform the commitments made at the tendering stage into a project automatically. So you put in parent project, contract start and end date, contract value, and so on. And what it does is it pulls this project through automatically with the commitments made into a project, and then you can start tracking through the project how they're performing. So there is a Miles Platting one we were just looking at has already been set up here. So these were the commitments made: 13 people, 26 weeks of apprenticeships, and so on. And then you can invite the contractors, and they start accessing that and entering their data. So the last piece of the jigsaw really is what Jackie mentioned earlier in terms of it's not just about the numbers, it's the quantitative and qualitative side of social value that's really important. And we have a surveys functionality built into Impact that allows you to capture some of this information. So here there's an example of a youth wellbeing survey. You can set up as many surveys as you like within Impact, and much the same way as any other survey tool you will have used, you can select different question types and build the survey that way. I'll just show you one here, just preview it for you. So this one has an ID because it's young people, so I'm just going to add an ID, and then you can ask different question types. So this one is about it's an initiative to encourage more young people to visit youth clubs, and then what the impact of that has actually been. So it's asking you details about how long you've been visiting and so on. And then, it depends on the survey recipients as to how you want to display the questions. There's smiley faces here because it's young people. It might be easier for them to interact with, and so on. So you go back to, sorry, let me just close that. So if I go back to the survey itself, you can see the results come back into various charts and graphs and word clouds, and you're able to evaluate the information with filters and so on there. It also allows you to have a dashboard. Now, this is what we call distance travelled. Essentially, you're asking a cohort over a period of time the same questions, and then you're able to establish changes over time. So this is looking at changes in wellbeing over time, depending on the length of time that the young person has attended a youth club. So that's how that's displayed. So as well as all that, Impact can be branded for your organisation. You can have your logo there so it's familiar. We also have we can actually set it up with Active Directory, single sign-on, so it's sort of part of your IT suite as well. But in brief, that's sort of what the main elements of Impact look like. I've shown you sort of how to look at projects and goals with dashboards. There is also reports, so you can set up different reports to run here. So if you wanted to look at all data by project, you can look at it in table format. You can download those reports. You can PDF those reports. You can change the different types of whether you want sums, averages, minimum, maximum. Let me show you a few different ones. So there's one for full-time employment across a number of different projects which you've selected. So you can add different projects here. So you can select just the ones you want to see if you want to compare one activity over multiple projects, for instance. Lots of different ways to report. So let's look at donations, a different way to display it in a column rather than a bar chart. there's pie charts, line charts, so there's different ways to represent that data. So I hope, I'm very conscious that I've talked a lot, and I hope that all made sense. And you know, Jackie and I are open to questions from anyone with regards to impact itself, or, you know, Havering's obviously how they're using impact or will be using impact to capture social value.
Thank you both, Bethan and Jackie, for that thorough overview. I think we've got a question in the chat from Ilaria, who asks, how does the platform work to identify cost savings? Because I know you shared a lot of information about contributions made by suppliers. I think this is just a different lens of looking at that.
Yeah,
shall I start a little bit though?
Okay.
Because I was thinking just in terms of like Havering's perspective, it was really through, you know, two ways. It was looking at, you know, the framework that we would use in terms of tracking benefits. Because as you know, the impact is very agnostic, so you can use like a tracker to you know, track what financial benefits or any kind of like savings or cost savings, but also in terms of identifying, which is the key word, it's about the analysation of all of that data as well. So there's ways in which we can look at, you know, having a whole picture, and we can see, you know, if there's any duplication in areas, or is there any area just in terms of delivering something and it costs less in terms of delivering that. So it may be better us doing, you know, a specific program that will yield a different output or a better output as well, as part of the information, you know, the information that's there. So it's all about the analysing the reporting as well. So Bethan, do you want to add on to that at all? That's what it's more about. It's about reading that data a little bit better than what we do.
Yeah, so I mean, there's automations that happen with impact, like I showed with the conversion factors that you can add that would allow you to be able to set up the cost benefits. But when you're talking about analysing the data, as Jackie mentioned, because there's lots of different ways to view that. So there's the dashboard, you can go into more detail in a tabular reports if you want to, you can look at it on a project level. It allows you to be able to do that real-time analysis and be able to make those important decisions around cost benefit. You know, it's looking at which projects are performing and which aren't, and taking those decisions earlier to be able to actually put your efforts into what is really working and delivering the most social value.
Great, thank you for that. I think we have another question from Lucy, who's asking about the information needed for the converter.
So the information needed for the converter would come from whichever framework you're deciding to use. So for instance, I use TOMS because TOMS is very common, people generally understand. TOMS will have a proxy within their framework for converting number of apprentices into a social value monetary figure. Now, what you would do is you would put that conversion or that proxy into impact, and impact will automatically then, for each log that has a apprentice logged, it will convert that into the equivalent monetary value. Much the same as like if you're using DEFRA for environmental, for example, then that has a CO2 conversion factor in. So it's saying, you know, if you're doing a cycle to work scheme, then it might be that you're saving this much CO2 as a result of going on your bike rather than your usual method of transport. So there's that's how you use the conversions. And like I say, once they're set within impact, it allows you to be able to run all the reports automatically. You don't have to think about how these are calculating unless you're auditing, and then you can go back and see where the evidence has come from.
Thank you, that's really helpful and really clear to know. Again, floor for any other questions.
I have a question. Okay, this is just sort of not really a question. I'm just going to. I'm coming from Newham. My name is Jerry Okello, from Newham, and I thought I would want to have a chat with you, Jackie, or Bethan outside. That's just what I wanted to say, or send you an email so we have a chat, because we got that working relationship in terms of. So I'm equally very interested in social value, as you know. Just come up on us.
No, definitely, Jerry. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, but it can be available at any point. I guess Genta can provide our email addresses and then we can pick up directly.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, more than happy to make those connections. We've got another question from Dave, who's asking about whether any organisations have used this tool to measure impact for digital inclusion projects, things like supply of devices to residents, data plans, digital skills, etc. And if so, would these types of features and data sets need to be custom built in the activities section?
So activities are driven by, activities are custom to a certain degree anyway, because they're driven by whatever your activities are or your initiatives are in your organisation. So if you have one that's concentrating on digital inclusion, that might be, you know, you've got an overall goal for that with a number of activities that sit underneath that, such as supply of devices, as you just mentioned. So each of those would be a separate activity that you can log to. Now, our sister organisation, I said we were born from a social enterprise. They actually are very heavily involved in digital inclusion projects. So they create websites and they make signposts and so on for organisations who are looking to transform the way that they're capturing data. So we can, yeah, by all means, the activities are flexible, so that will allow you to do digital inclusion anyway, but we have experience of that through our sister company. Our clients, from a client perspective, off the top of my head, I can't think of a specific example, but I do know because basically our clients will use impact for digital inclusion. I can't think of a specific example off the top of my head. I do know that there were some housing associations who were looking at sort of access. So for financial inclusion, they were looking at digital inclusion to allow people to access online bank accounts and so on. So one of our housing association clients has done that. I do know that for sure, but I can find out and I can give you some more examples.
Now, just to add to that, because usually digital inclusion, so when I've worked in housing associations before, we've used it for, you know, part of a project. So using digital inclusion to, you know, access employment, using digital inclusion to access, you know, more advice and support, that kind of way. So we've used it in that respect, and also looking at, you know, access to equipment as well as that. So that's the kind of program we've done rather than digital inclusion per se.
Thank you, Will. That's really, really helpful. We have a question from Lucy about licensing and user caps. And I wondered whether, as part of that answer, if you could kind of just explain the pricing. I know Jackie mentioned it in her presentation, but just to clarify what the pricing structure is, licensing, is there a cap on users? And I think Lucy makes a good point about the fact that this kind of platform seems like it works better when lots of users, or you get better information when lots of users are adding the data. So
yes, so yeah, so that licensing works in that way, i.e. your license allows you to have unlimited users across your organization and supply chain partners, because it is about, like I mentioned in when I was describing how impact works, it is about engagement. You know, it's all very well having some sort of platform. If nobody's engaging with it, you're not capturing that data. So that's really important. So we've made impact as visual and user friendly as possible to encourage engagement, and our licensing reflects that, because you have unlimited users and supply chain partners. So you can set up as many users, as many projects, as many activities, as many goals as you need. So with regards to the pricing, so it's a £12,000 annual license, and that includes so we're going through the process now of onboarding Havering, so it includes your onboarding, it includes your training, it includes then your annual license with hosting and support.
thank you, that's really helpful. And just related to Dave's question about customization or potential customization of fields and things like that, are they included in that yearly subscription fee effectively, or is that a separate development cost?
They're included in that. So the way that it works is that things like you've seen, so with the header where it says projects, activities, goals, you can call those whatever you want to call them. It might be that the goals, some of our clients call those KPIs, for example. That's all customizable. All the forms are customizable. The activities are set up according to what you need anyway, so that's customizable. All can be branded. That's all included within the license charge. So any additional development cost would be anything that needs to be added to impact that is specific to that organization. So it's, we think of an example. So if you wanted to, trying to think of a specific example, it doesn't happen very often, to be honest. The way that it works with the development as well is if someone requests, if a client requests a feature, so we get a feature request, we think that's beneficial for the tool and the development of the tool and our other clients, we will adopt that into our product roadmap and therefore roll it out to all clients. So it's very rare that there is a development cost involved in impact. And if there is, it would be something very, very specific to that client.
Great, thank you. No, that's really helpful. And actually that brings me to another question about product updates and things like that. Are there any kind of what's the impact on borrowers, I guess, for any new releases or anything like that? Are there resource requirements or anything like that, or do they just happen in the background automatically?
Yeah, so we would notify all administrators of our clients' organizations if an update is going to be made. Those updates are made out of hours, so you won't be disrupted, and you would be, as a client, you would be entitled to any upgrades to impact that are made. So like I say, we roll those out to all clients. So you would benefit from, for instance, if Havering have a great idea, we adopt it into the product roadmap, and then it would benefit all organizations.
Great, no, that's actually really helpful. And am I right in assuming that those updates happen in the background without kind of impacting the use of the tool during the working hours and things like that?
Yeah, so they all happen out of hours, and they're all tested fully in a robust test environment first before they're rolled out to clients. And if clients are involved in that development feature, and we might have more interaction with that particular client, so they can actually use it in a test environment as well first, just to check it does what they wanted it to do.
Great, sounds good. That's really helpful. I'm going to pause now just for a couple of seconds in case anyone else has any kind of final questions, and then we'll wrap up if not. Any final questions? Get them in now. Looks like there's no other questions from the group, but again, we can follow up with yourselves if you do have any questions after the session, and I can put you in touch with Jackie and Bethan for sure. We'll share the video with you afterwards, but I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you, Jackie and Bethan, for presenting today. I think it's been really helpful for us to actually see the art of the possible, if you like. We've looked at other platforms, so kind of this almost kind of complete understanding of that all makes a much richer, bigger picture for us. So thank you, and thank you everyone for taking part in today's session. We'll be in touch shortly after this. But for now,
thank you. Thanks,
have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.